Hello everyone, this is the Chronosight Weekly Astrology Forecast with Ginger Bayul for early March 2026, covering the period from March 1st to the 15th. There are quite a few important alignments in March as well, though not as many as in February. But first, a total lunar eclipse occurs on March 3rd. While not as major as a solar eclipse, a lunar eclipse is still a very significant alignment, and we already had that annular solar eclipse in mid-February. So the 14-day period between the annular solar eclipse and the total lunar eclipse is when most major events will cluster. So it's important to focus on that. Now for the first one, the celestial alignment approaching, is the total lunar eclipse, which I have previously mentioned. It forms on March 3rd and is effective in its own right from February 24th to March 10th. However, in reality, we can consider the 14 days between the annular solar eclipse on February 17th and the total lunar eclipse on March 3rd to be more important. During this particular stretch of time, what you would normally expect to be just a minor injury or a simple illness could suddenly and unexpectedly worsen, and before you even realize it, you might find yourself ending up in the hospital. Therefore, throughout this entire period, it is certainly best to try and avoid getting hurt or falling ill whenever possible, although we must admit that such things are not always within our own personal control. And this total lunar eclipse, rather than a hopeful future, might make you feel like, wow, the world is really tough. Things aren't going my way. It could be a somewhat difficult and rather bleak period where you realize that you're being pushed around helplessly by powerful external forces and influences, regardless of your own will. Even if you succeed, it's not because of your intent, but just due to a stroke of random luck or pure chance. And even if you fail despite your hard work, it's due to external factors like policy changes or a company going bankrupt, causing your livelihood to vanish in an absurd way. Essentially, an individual cannot resist the flow of a group or a nation. There is simply no way you can fight against it. So it can be a time when you feel completely powerless, like I'm really just a tiny, insignificant human being, and you truly feel that deep sense of vulnerability. And as is often the case with eclipses, bad news like elderly relatives falling ill, being hospitalized, or even passing away might come up during this time. Now, 3 days later, as Venus makes its movement, which happens quite frequently, Chronosight Weekly Horoscope Forecast, Scheat, it meets Skeet. Since Skeet is at 359 degrees, the very end of the 12 signs, it stands out even more. It seems to stand out. This is a structure that operates on March 6th. At this time, things go a bit wrong, but it's entirely my fault, so there's no one else to blame. I have no one else to blame. So, an emotional cycle can easily form where you're even angrier, because you have no one to vent your frustration on. And furthermore, I might have to do something by a very specific time, but I really don't want to do it. So a foolish psychology of burying my head in the sand like an ostrich and pretending not to know might eventually translate into action. Now, and just 2 days later, Venus moves from Pisces into Aries, falling into a state of detriment. In that state, it meets Neptune and then soon meets Saturn. And in between, the fixed star Deneb Kaitos is also involved. So Venus, Neptune, Saturn, and Deneb Kaitos all meet within a few days of each other, which happens between March 7th and 8th. And this structure operates for about 10 days from March 5th to 15th. What we should note here is that in Aries, Venus is in detriment and Saturn is in fall. So Aries is the worst place for Venus and Saturn to meet in conjunction. But here, Neptune and Deneb Kaitos, which is close to a malefic star, are also involved. It's not an ordinary structure. So at this time, especially issues of protocol, attire, or etiquette, In a way, the shell that has nothing to do with the essence of the situation, the shell is also important, and procedural parts are important too, but there are specific sets of formulas for the courtesy I should show or how I should treat others, which differ by country or era. Consequently, disputes often arise in those particular areas. So, if a dispute arises here, it's quite something, because this isn't even law. Protocol like this isn't law, and often there are no clear rules. Also, if customs, nationality, or gender are different, it's an area where excuses for those differences are naturally expected. But because disputes arise in those areas, naturally both A and B think they are right. So this kind of dispute is not only useless to others, but also hard to resolve. So those kinds of wasteful and inefficient problems can frequently arise, and then someone tries to make a very unconventional attempt to change things, but people with a somewhat hypocritical stance try to actively block it from happening. So what exactly do you call this? Well, it's a matter of pros and cons. In a typical debate, people with very clear pros and cons clash with each other, with some trying to push for a change and others trying to stop it, which can often lead to a real tug of war, as I mentioned before. To an outside observer, this might seem completely pointless, but the parties involved are fighting with a great deal of seriousness. So, from the perspective of outsiders observing from the sidelines, they might think everyone is living such busy lives. They're using so much energy on something so trivial. They might find it a bit absurd. In other words, the internal attitude and the external perspective can be completely different. So that's something to consider as well. Now, and then, on that very same day, on the exact same day, Mars meets Fomalhaut. This occurs on March 8th. This specific configuration is active from March 7th through to the 8th. Now, the Mars-Fomalhaut alignment is a bit hypocritical in a slightly different sense than Deneb Kaitos. So, on the surface, they maintain a pleasant smile and act friendly. But deep inside, they secretly harbor deep-seated jealousy, resentment, and friction. We describe this as having a black heart. They treat people while holding on to these negative emotions until something eventually triggers it to be revealed to those around them, which can lead to significant complications in their relationships or social life. So they try to deceive others while harboring poison inside, but is it really that easy to deceive people? People have intuition after all. Also, because of this clumsy and poorly executed concealment, you might try to pull off a deceptive scam, but instead end up being easily deceived yourself or facing a sharp counterattack. So anyone planning to deceive someone would be wise to avoid doing so at this time. You really shouldn't even try it right now. Instead, you might get hit with a counter and be knocked out. Taking a look at this from a very similar perspective, feelings of aggression sometimes truly need to be expressed directly and quite bluntly to be effective. But some people try to express it indirectly, just to avoid criticism or blame. So that kind of attitude can act as a poison now, potentially leading to a complete and utter social downfall in the long run. So instead of trying to deceive others, being sincere will be more helpful during this time. Now, and on the following day, Mercury, which was in retrograde, retrograde Mercury forms a trine with Jupiter. Now, Mercury is retrograding in Pisces, and Jupiter is also about to go direct, approaching a station, and it's in Cancer. It forms on March 9th and is a structure that operates for about 10 days from March 5th to the 14th. Now, during this particular period, proposals that were previously turned down or dismissed, or contracts that collapsed while trying to make a deal, are brought back to the table as if they are really going to happen again. Such opportunities tend to emerge quite unexpectedly. They come so unexpectedly that naturally, the one who moves the fastest will win. But surprisingly, the person who seemed calm and in no rush will be the one moving the quickest. So if you think the outward appearance matches the inner reality at this time, you'll be in for a big surprise. Similarly, the power dynamic might seem clear, but in reality it's the exact opposite. Between the outward appearance and the inner reality, the person who seems to be in the weaker position might actually hold the real decision-making power. So if you are currently right in the middle of trying to sign an important contract or close a major deal now, well, you really shouldn't trust your own eyes too much. Especially if you happen to have your usual set of preconceptions, it is definitely best to just let them go completely. Now, 2 days later, Jupiter finally, yes, the R mark disappears. The retrograde ends, it stations, and then it begins to move direct. It's been exactly 4 months since this happened. This is March 11th, and this Jupiter direct station is a structure that operates from March 5th to the 17th. Now, because this Jupiter direct station is within the influence of Sirius, it's huge. So even if it's not you, someone around you will hit the jackpot. It could be real estate, stocks, bonds, or maybe even crypto or commodities. It'll be different for every person, but someone nearby is definitely going to strike it big. And the price of some specific asset will skyrocket so much that it'll truly make your head spin. Now, because these things happen so incredibly explosively in such a very short time, people actually get more anxious. The results are so good, it's almost scary. Like, is this really okay for us? A sense of impatience starts to build, wondering if this can really keep going. So, while those who can effectively manage this sense of restless impatience will develop a strategic long-term vision, you will notice that various opportunities will start popping off all around you in a positive way, with your numbers and key metrics climbing upward. And that could potentially last for a very long period of time. Now, on the 14th of March, as Mars continues its journey, yes, as Mars moves across the sky, it meets the North Node, and this degree is where the fixed star Skat is located. So Mars, the North Node, and Skat all meet on March 14th. This structure operates from the 9th to the 18th, lasting about 10 days. At this time in the IT industry, especially in AI-related fields, very innovative technology will be introduced, making people go, wow, this is amazing. But because of that, other industries might unexpectedly get hit by stray bullets, causing them to collapse and their future prospects to darken. Not long ago, when the Claude AI model from Anthropic first appeared on the scene, the stock price of that world-class business management software company plummeted almost overnight. It is a classic example of market volatility. When a powerful new technology suddenly emerges and gains traction, the existing technology that can be easily replaced by it often faces an immediate and existential threat to its market dominance and long-term viability. The dominant global hegemony it once held is inevitably destined to be broken. But this time, it could definitely manifest in a more destructive way. That's one way to look at it. And also regarding electricity, electronics and communications, suddenly, a sudden accident could happen, like a server going down completely, or lines being cut, or maybe a fire or explosion suddenly occurring while a data center is being built. In this way, strange and unusual occurrences that wouldn't typically take place in reality could occur, and on a personal level, relentlessly pushing forward with brute force, with the vibrant power of youth, the results achieved by staying up all night and working tirelessly in that manner. Instead of being told it was foolish to do so, you might receive recognition like, wow, well done, for those who were pushing forward with quantity rather than quality in a somewhat unrefined and brute force manner anyway. Utilizing that approach around this time could be quite helpful. On that same day, as Venus moves along, that star Algenib, which I recall is Gamma Pegasi in the constellation of Pegasus. Alpha is Marca, Beta is Scheat, and Gamma was probably Algenib. Algenib, just like its two older brothers, is a star with Martian attributes that are a bit off track. Instead, Algenib, perhaps because it's the youngest, has a tendency to use its head a bit more. Specifically, there's a good chance that an unfortunate event will turn into a gain. So anyway, Venus and Algenib meet on the 14th. and it's active from the 13th to the 14th, during which you can also make significant profits from investments. This would be even more so for those whose time lord is Venus. Moreover, since Jupiter recently stationed direct and we're in that effective period, it's even more likely to manifest as investment returns. So, in that sense, regarding your personal money, general finances, or long-term investments, there is quite a bit of very good news in early March. It is not bad at all. However, the Venus-Algenib alignment has a bit of a narcissistic side to it. There is a strong sense of self-love involved. But when Venus meets the star Algenib in the sky, Algenib because of that relaxed attitude born from self-love, you might seem a bit arrogant to others, but because of that ease, you don't make rushed, hasty, or pressured decisions, and it's kind of like, well, everything I do is bound to succeed, that sort of feeling. So instead, at this time, you can stand in an advantageous position and seize the upper hand. Now, and a day later, retrograde Mercury moves one step further and meets with Mars. It meets with Mars on the 15th. They meet at 10 degrees and 2 minutes of Pisces. This is a configuration that's active from March 13th to the 18th. During this time, it's really good for sales or entertaining through very informal routes, winning people over. It's not through official channels, it's through informal routes that will be helpful. Conversely, if you're the one being sold to at this time, it's very subtle and fast, and it means it's easy to be fooled by some smooth talking. The fact that such sales tactics work well means there's a high chance you'll be sold on it. That's why, especially now, if you're asked to sign an important contract, particularly a new one or one where a clause or wording was slightly changed around this time, it's better not to do it. You should wait about 5 to 10 days, reconsider it, listen to what experts have to say, and then decide. You shouldn't just fall for it in the heat of the moment. So, early March is quite dynamic like this. Chronosight Weekly Horoscope Forecast. That's all for the early March 2026 forecast. Thank you.